Blog Talk Radio.
Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And in the presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I see aspiring to be free. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Within and without, above and below, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. Without and within, below and above, yeah, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. In the presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I find in tune with the divine. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. Restore the balance of the universal mind. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. For to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shabbat Shalom, holy angel of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence.
Thank you for joining me here tonight on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I'm your hostess this evening. The music you were just listening to there at the beginning of the show is I Sense Your Presence. It's by Shemshai. Great musicians that performed in the Sedona area when I knew them and when I met them. And, of course, I do encourage you to check out their work. Their work is found at www.shemshai.com, and that's SHIMSHAI. So definitely check them out. And they've got some freebie downloads every now and then as well. So lots of great music as they're living the dream, so to say, traveling around, playing their music, having an amazing life. Welcome back, by the way, to those that are returning, and also welcome to those that are joining us here for the very first time. We are now streaming live in 3 additional places besides Blog Talk Radio. That would be TalkStream Live, StreamFinder, and PEN, also known as Pair Encounters Network. And I welcome everybody listening through those channels as well as those people who are catching our podcast at TuneIn.com and iTunes and through my YouTube channel. Here at Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, I look at different ways that compassion exists in our lives, how to remove our blocks, resistances, frustrations, and more. And some weeks I'm discussing different aspects of compassion, how it's in our life, how it affects our life, maybe the different areas of compassion. And some weeks I'm doing more exercises and practical implementations. I've done a few of those in recent weeks, such as when we had the week on chakras and the week on manifestation. Had some great little exercises in there. And many times I also have guests on the show so that you can learn about their work and other things that complement and work with compassion. I also highlight different musical artists along the way. Last year I had Stephen Halpern and Peter Cater on, both Grammy nominees. And I've also had Jill Matson on the show, Claire Hedin on the show, and Bruce Ciccarelli. His music, by the way, is free. If you missed that show, go back, listen in, and you'll find out how to catch up with his music and get that music for free. He's doing some amazing work there. And I've actually got a musical guest coming on next week, Craig Corellos. So it'll be worth tuning in for that. In my own work, what I do is I focus on helping people find and use compassion in their everyday lives. I've created the Genesis Clearing Statement, and if you've missed that, you can certainly catch it in our archives. And also, I've authored 4 books, the most recent being You, Me, Life, Dreams, and its companion workbook. Those are based on relationships, how to create, find, build your perfect relationship for you. Also, Activating Compassion and Activating Compassion, the workbook, the first 2 that I put out. And in addition, I've created the Compassion Tour, which is a multi-state nationwide tour including workshops, retreats, seminars, book signings, and fundraising events. And I do have the 2014 tour events listed on my website. I am still adding events, by the way. So if you don't see something in your area, there may be getting something added, or check in with me and send me a little message and let me know. And I can always maybe catch up with you from the road somewhere, which actually is amazingly starting in just a few days, and be starting out in California, around the Central Coast region. I'll be at a few places. I'll be at a place in Solvang. Then I'll be going into Cambria, and you might remember earlier this year where I interviewed Darcy Cleome on her place, Amethyst Healing Center, and that's where I'm going to be in Cambria. I will then be doing a full-day event in San Francisco, and then headed on up to the Seattle area, where I have a full 2-day weekend event running, as well as 2 evening events. And there are limited spaces for these events, by the way. I take very, very few people on them, and I run them no matter how many people are there. So that's always good to know. Also got an amazing full-day event that's going to be happening in the Black Hills area of South Dakota, an area called Harney Peak, which is a wonderful energy vortex out there, and it's just an amazing hike to do. And I work in nature with that, coaching and bringing about consciousness and awareness. So check those out. I'll also be around Pennsylvania, Maryland, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. area, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Jersey for the East Coast region. I'll be passing through Atlanta, doing an event there. I'm also going to be booked into Texas, around the San Antonio area, near Thanksgiving time, and then I'm still working out venues for Arizona in December. So quite a few places right now. There's about 45 different events that are up for the next 3 months, so definitely go in, check them out. And what you can do is you can check those out, again, through my website, JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com, and you can also follow some of the events are listed on my event site, JessieAnnNicholsGeorge.eventbrite.com, which is where the paying events are that you need to prepay for on those. And just a reminder, by the way, if you enjoy the show this evening, make sure that you tell your friends, your family, all those people out there, significant others, the whole works out there, because I find when I'm sharing stuff that there's always somebody that comes through and goes, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for bringing this awareness out. I was having this conversation and we were just discussing this topic, or I was just trying to find information on it. So you never know whose life you're going to be able to touch or impact just by sharing something. And it may just be the perfect thing for them at this time. And they'll just use the same link that you used to get into our show tonight. They'll use that to access the archives. They can go through my page on the Main Street Universe tab on my website as well. All of the archive shows are there, as well as going to my YouTube channel or into iTunes and look under Main Street Universe, which is our network of shows here, and they'll find it in there as well. And now, before we get started, those that have listened in before, you know that one of my favorite little books to work with is The 72 Names of God. It's by Yehuda Berg, who is a tremendous Kabbalah master. And Yehuda's work I really love because he works the way I work, which is to bring things into everyday life. And I feel very strongly about that, because when we bring things into everyday life, you take these big concepts and you make them accessible. That's where we can really start to implement them. We can have all the loftiest ideas and concepts out there in the world, but if we're not able to bring them into our life, our daily life, then a lot of people don't get the value of that. So he helps to do that, and this message will be also on my page of the Main Street Universe tab on my website, so you can go back and reflect on it during the week as well. Now, tonight's message from Yehuda is titled Soul Mate. That is the common name here. And his little tidbit here says, looking for the perfect date, the ideal mate, true friends, loyal associates, or the right business partner? And he goes on with some insight on this. When a single unified soul is set to enter into this material dimension, it is first divided into two halves, male and female. As these two halves of one soul undergo transformation in the physical world, either through suffering and ordeal or through proactive spiritual transformation, they progressively draw closer to one another. The uniting of two halves of one soul is an inevitable fate, but the timing depends upon their level of spirituality. When the time is ripe, true soulmates find one another, even if they are worlds apart, whether physically, on opposite sides of the globe, or spiritually, with contrasting lifestyles and backgrounds. Moreover, the concept of soulmates does not refer only to marriage. The concept of soulmates also applies to relationships with friends, business colleagues, and partners in every sort of shared endeavor. And the meditation that he gives on this is, the energy of soulmates is aroused through this sequence of letters. You attract the other half of your soul. All of your existing relationships are deeply enriched, imbued with soulmate energy. And again, the common name is soulmate. The formal name on this is Shin Aleph Hey. Again, that's Shin Aleph Hey. So that's our great message from Yehuda. And it kind of reminds us that, when we're working on our path, when we're growing, when we're proactive in our process, that we're not going to be able to miss anything that we're really here to get, or anybody that we're really here to connect. It may not always come in the form we'd like it to, or it might not always come in that romantic ideal form, but it does always come to us. And the key is, will we embrace that when the time comes? It's very interesting on our topic to get this message tonight, because our topic deals with trauma. It deals with war veterans. It deals with PTS, in parentheses D, because some people don't like the D on there, but post-traumatic syndrome. And what's interesting about that is because oftentimes when we find ourselves in different groups of people, whether it's in, say, a war situation where you're on a team, or whether it's a work situation, or whether it's a group of friends, or even a city or location, or even a soul grouping where you connect out there on the internet through groups on Facebook, for example, we're brought together because of this soulmate type of connection. And so many people, they think of soulmate only in the romantic terms, but we come together as these groupings. We find each other because we're meant to come together in this lifetime. And again, it's not always the way we initially might see it, but it is definitely what we've agreed to. It is definitely finding pieces of ourselves out there. And it's those outer pieces that help us find the inner pieces, and the inner pieces that help us find the outer pieces. So it's kind of a great little parallel, and I think of that in the infinity symbol because there's the opposites, but they also are meeting at the same time. Now, a little thought here before we head off on to break tonight. And this kind of is going to get us ready for our topic tonight. How much trauma really resides within our veterans? Is it possible to really release somebody from PTSD? Are those that have been to war ever really able to recover? It seems that we are so quick to place war veterans and others that have been through great trauma into a position of victimhood, or to give them leniency in ways that excuse everything, or keep them strung on drugs or other panacea to so-called settle down their episodes. However, is this really any kind of service to them? They get benefits, and yet they must be a huge victim to receive those benefits. They are praised, but their actions dismissed and excused no matter what. They are recognized, then placed on drugs so that we won't notice them too much. This is starting to sound like other perverted cycles of control that I've seen, that use dichotomies and spirals of thought to confuse and distract us. So many starting out with good intentions, wanting to be of value in the world, only to end up in a cycle of getting lost in the shuffle or unappreciated for their efforts. Then what do? Put patches on them instead of really getting to the core of what they need. Jeremiah Shattuck has been in the war scene, but instead of following some of the traditional ways dictated by others, upon returning to society, took a path of his own. His research led him to look at a bigger need, which is transitioning through care for body, mind, and spirit. He realized that one course of treating problems with problems was not going to work. I find this to be a really great example. Most of us have been through some sort of major trauma at some point in our lives. At least for us, it was traumatic. And we get pushed around by society who wants to diagnose us, probe us, control us, and pump us full of drugs and options that devalue us and create more issues. Jeremiah focuses on total detox. Now, I personally have found body, mind, spirit detoxing to be incredibly powerful. And we are used to this on a physical level, right? We hear that with addicts and things like that, got to get them detoxed on that physical level. But when we do it as a total package, on all levels, we are prone to see the leaps and bounds that allow us to have a life we enjoy. Even the most aware and healthy can benefit from a regular maintenance program. What I like about the transition process is that it is just that. It isn't right or wrong labels, nor a one-size-fits-all program or a cold turkey change. It is a shift, a readjustment, a proactive process that changes out our pain for pleasure, sadness for joy, and so on. It is focused on the individual. This is an important approach after trauma, as it supports a person in finding their own sense of value. It doesn't view them as a damaged or victim person, but is an opportunity for someone to shift from one space to another. It is a supportive process that keeps the individual actively involved in making changes, thus taking responsibility for creating a life that is more pleasurable for them. Also, when we detox all areas together, we naturally will realign with a wholeness. Too many times, people forget that we are not dealing with just emotions or just a broken spirit or just damage to the physical body. Each one is interrelated. What experiences have you had with yourself or others that were traumatic? How did you choose to shift and change or help someone else do that? Do you feel that someone who has been through extreme trauma of body, mind, and spirit can transition into an enjoyable life? This week, we're taking a look at a component of compassion that's related to the aspect in my books of no more pain. And this reminds us that no matter how challenging life gets, we don't have to live in suffering. It reminds us that pain is a choice, not something that has to rule our lives. I'm going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to be looking at some of these aspects of PTSD and transitioning the warrior. The song that I have for you during our break is called Frozen in Time. It's by Claire Hedin. And if you'd like to find out more about Claire's work, she does amazing things. She does all kinds of things from sound healing to music to working out in nature. Check her work out. You can do that at www.clairehedin.com. That's CLAREHEDIN.com. We'll be back shortly.
People's chits are getting in the way.
Welcome back. You are listening to Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and my name is Jessie Ann Nichols George. I'm your hostess this evening. The song that you were just listening to is called Frozen in Time. It's by Claire Hedin, and you can definitely check out more of her work at www.clairehedin.com. That's CLAREHEDIN.com. And, you know, it was very interesting. Prior to going to break tonight, I shared a little something with you that I tend to put out there and that I put out into some groups and throughout LinkedIn and some of my other areas. And I was so blessed to have several war people and veterans from war step up and say, thank you for finally speaking the truth about us. Thank you for sharing what really happens and these spirals. And so when that message came through, I want you to know that that's what people are really going through out there. It is an amazing thing, and this is something that we are going to delve into tonight because it delves many, many ways. Those that had seen the show posting, we did have scheduled on the show tonight Jeremiah Shattuck. I have been trying to reach Jeremiah throughout the week, and so I am certainly sending prayers and blessings out to him because I have not been able to get in contact with him. But he is not with us tonight, but we are going to be discussing his work, and I am going to be sharing his concepts with you in addition to my own input with the work he's doing. He's been extremely busy lately putting things out there and putting the work in. So to give you a little background about Jeremiah, he's a conscious life force raw food alchemist, and he is a self-healed Iraqi freedom combat veteran who was exposed to biological weapons that impaired his life, yet led him to a path of healing and transformation. And what he did is through raw foods, detoxifying, educating himself in several modalities, he restored his immune system and began to live a healthy and thriving life. And Jeremiah, what he did was he got in there and he researched diet and biochemistry, quantum physics and physiology, and he now specializes in medicinal nutrition and cultured living foods. And he's also involved with White Ormus Cafe, which is a delivery catering service under Conscious Life Force, which offers a living foods menu, and that is based, by the way, in the Los Angeles area around Santa Monica. So he's really an amazing person. If you're in that area, I definitely encourage you to go by there, check out what he's doing there, say hi to him, because I know they've been staying very, very busy. They cater privately and commercially, and they have a focus on maintaining proper homeostasis in a toxic environment, which is so critical today because our environment is horrendously toxic. Whether we're talking our home, our air, our skies, our oceans, it's incredibly toxic, even for those people who have not been in these war zones, who have not been to Iraq and fought in these battles. Now, Jeremiah is also the key factor behind Transition the Warrior, and that is an organization of specialists that use alternative therapy and food to transition the warrior peacefully back into society from war. And after his discharge from the United States Marine Corps, what he did was chose to dedicate his life to rehabilitating himself and others that have dealt with PTSD, be it a major or minor in their life. So tonight we're kind of looking at some of those things. And if you'd like to check out more of that work that Jeremiah is doing, he's got two websites. First one is www.transitionthewarrior.com. And then the other one, which is connected to Conscious Life Force Raw Food and the White Ormus Cafe, is www.imraw.me. So that's imraw.me. And those are both of his websites. They're at the bottom of the show description tonight. And so, it's very interesting when we look at these different components and pieces, and Jeremiah is doing amazing things. And one of the things that, he went through, and we don't even begin oftentimes to comprehend what the vets are going through. They're so often led into believing that they are doing a good thing. They're serving their country. And many people go off to do that, to serve their country. And what happens? They find out they get betrayed. And this is something almost all of us can relate to, is betrayal, right? We find betrayal in relationships. We find betrayal in friends, in the work environment, in family. But to do it, it's like in the war environment, you have compounded pieces there as well. So many people go in with this innocence. So many go in with this right intention, if you want to say that, to war. And we're led that we're doing the right thing by fighting for our country. And, it's important for us to keep in mind where war comes from. A lot of times, war comes from that small group of people that wants to control us. For them, it's like a big game. It's like a big, just fun game in their mind where they get to control all kinds of people and they get to do all kinds of things. We talk about peace and we talk about going to fight for peace. But you know what? Peace doesn't come by fighting. We don't obtain peace through war. And it's something for us to keep in mind. It's one of the great, big illusions on the face of this earth. And when we look at that, it's really sad because we have all these veterans by whatever war. My dad, who has been passed away for 7.5 years, was in the Navy, and he went in to fight as well during the war. And the tremendous amount of things we can't even, as we sit in comfy homes, as we sit with our friends enjoying our, dinners at a restaurant or takeout or whatever it is, begin to imagine what it's like to sit out there on those lands, far away from home, listening to this constant loud noise, the booming, the constant uncertainty, And to not only have that coming from a so-called opposing team, but to have your own put you in harm's way for their own purposes. Is it any wonder that these people come back with PTSD or PTS? A lot of people are dropping the D. We had that happen, I believe it was last year when I was doing a show on PTSD, and they were saying we want to drop the D in PTSD because it's not a disease. It is a syndrome, but it's not a disease. And I think that that's one thing to look at. But one of the things, for example, that Jeremiah went through in the process of his so-called service was that he had gotten 3 out of the 6 vaccinations for anthrax. And these are the kind of things where they think it's just really cool. Our government, other governments, they think it's really cool to just use our service people as guinea pigs to test this stuff out. And that's basically what they're doing. You know, we saw this with Agent Orange years ago. We've seen it in a lot of different cases. In Jeremiah's case, it was anthrax. 11 years later, after receiving only 3, he didn't get the full 6, he still cannot wash his hands or touch municipal water sources. And if you want a visual for that, go onto his Facebook page, Jeremiah Shattuck. That's Jeremiah, Shattuck, Shattuck. And he just did a post on there recently, and you'll see his hands are opened up. The skin is raw. That was our government. That's what anthrax does. That's what they're creating toxic environments, whether it's spraying the chemtrails, whether it is using pesticides on our food, whatever it is. And that's another thing that happens with a lot of our war vets is what they're fed and what they're given to eat is highly toxic to their system. Jeremiah, one of his big things is truly pure water. And he talks about this in some of his work, the importance of that. And how many of us could imagine being in his position? You can't just turn on a sink and wash your hands because it's just painful. It's just raw skin, just rawly opened. I mean, we can kind of visualize that a little bit, right? If you've scraped your finger up or something like that and you stick it under the water and it kind of stings, we'll magnify that a few times over. Can you imagine? You can't just take an ordinary shower, an ordinary bath, because it burns your skin. These are the types of things Jeremiah has been living with. And these are the types of things he had to overcome. He now has become very proactive in helping to build the consciousness in people. He talks about this on his website, iamraw.me. And he talks about how our government is approving to take fish that has been caught from Japan that is not being tested for radioactive components. You know, think about that. Our government doesn't even care to test whether what has come over from Fukushima is radioactive. California has actually been hit quite hard, like where Jeremiah is. And that's been one of the big things. So, you know, he wants people to be aware of that. Watch out for seafood from that area. He ran some research on that and came up and found out that, you know, particularly like California, particularly southern and central California, is very affected. And what comes out of Japan, what comes out of these waters, is 500%. You heard me right. 500% more radioactive. It's a huge amount. We're not talking a small amount here. The iodine. Watch your iodine. How many people take that out there? They take it for thyroid. They add it as a nutritional supplement. You know, how many times do we go in the health food store? Oh, it's a supplement. It's totally fine. Well, the iodine that comes off of the coast of California, particularly southern and central coast, is also dealing with radioactive issues. It's really something to think about. He says, watch your labels. Organic doesn't mean that it's always pure. And that's why he puts such an emphasis on pure foods and pure lifestyle and pure water. When he did his research on this, what he found was only 70% of what goes into an organically labeled product has to be organic. So 30% can be anything. And if it doesn't register a certain point level in their system, it doesn't even have to go on the label. Okay, it starts making you think raw food sounds pretty darn good, doesn't it? When you start looking at those pieces. He puts a particular emphasis because diet was a huge thing for him. When he came out, he was told, I mean, now mind you, he's already been through all the war, listening to the gunfire, listening to these different things happening, experiencing all this aggravation and negative energy around him for this period of time. And he comes out, and this is what I was talking about. We place these people as a victim in society. Poor you, you need a bunch of drugs, right? And they told him that. They said, you need a bunch of drugs. It's not going to take care of anything. Matter of fact, it'll probably tear your body down a whole lot more and destroy your mind, but that's what you need. That's what they're telling him. And they told him there was no way he could ever recuperate his body. If you go on his website, iamraw.me, you'll see pictures of what he did. And it was all from detoxifying, from learning the alchemy of food. Not just nutrition, but the alchemy of food, and really learning specifically to what he was dealing with, to where he has been able to rehabilitate his body quite well without the use of drugs. We are so prone to do this to people. And again, whether the toxins are environmental, whether they're chemical, whether they're from situations like Jeremiah, this is all PTS stuff. We're all dealing with it on one level or another. None of us are totally an exception. Some people can deal with it better. Other people, they can't deal with it. But Jeremiah, for example, and other people out there are examples that it can happen. Now, one thing Jeremiah did know also was the fermented foods, which you've heard. I've had a couple of nutritional people on. Shelley Alexander earlier in the year. Bill Farr was another one that I had on. Craig Lang was another one that I've had on. All talked about these fermented foods, the probiotics. And I'm starting with the physical aspect, but we're also going to get into the energetic aspects here, because there's some really interesting energetic aspects when we talk about PTS and trauma that happens in our body. But what it's about is when we get in these toxic situations, toxic environments, toxic emotions, toxic food in our system, what really gets messed up in our system is our digestive tract. And as we learned the other week when I was doing the show on chakras, That's our processing center. So if our body physically is unable to process the toxins out, guess what? Our mental, our emotional, our spiritual all become toxic. We start thinking toxic. We start falling into the victim patterns. All of these different pieces there. So it's very important to take care of that. Now, I love when Jeremiah did his work and he did his research because he connected it to some energy factors. And I thought that was, really interesting. He also favors, for example, kelp noodles for raw vegans. He emphasizes enzyme-rich foods to clear free radicals from the body, which is very important when you're dealing with toxic environments and situations. And this is something for us to think about. If we're under high stress periods, we need to stop and think, we need the enzyme-rich foods. We need the digestive foods. We need the probiotics. And we know that comes through things like kefir and kimchi and our fermented foods. The fermentation part is what really feeds in that digestive. It's what really helps grow the positive bacteria that we need in our gut. And what Jeremiah connected in all of this from the nutrition aspect was he connected that the gut is the life force energy. And the life force energy creates our chakras. Okay, the chakras, it's a pretty big connection right there when you think about it. Okay, probiotics, they help to heal our gut. And the gut is the life force energy that creates your chakra energy. It creates your chi. It creates your intuition. It takes care of your immune system. Okay? So our food isn't just about food. Our food's about energy. Our food's about the functioning of our spirit and our soul and our mind and our emotions. It's about all of it. And what happens is there's a field of vibration. This is what he phrases it at. There's a field of vibration that's an output of microflora in your digestive tract. And what happens is the psychic energy, okay, so those of you out there that want to develop your psychic energy, this is how you do it. The psychic energy correlates with the strength of the digestive tract. Okay. Now we know that it also is highly impacted by the nervous system. Well, the nervous system is able to function or not function based on what's happening in your gut, in your digestive system. Okay? So people that have a really strong digestive system tend to be really highly psychic. And the key to a strong digestive system is fermented foods. We talk about one of the things Jeremiah is very pro is coconut water, coconut milk aspects in there. Shelley Alexander had talked about this back at the beginning of the year. You're welcome to go back and listen to those shows in the archives. Coconut kefir, wonderful for bringing the probiotics in and restoring the digestive system. I know myself, I have tried some of these things, and I personally have not been to a doctor in almost 5 years as a result of taking care of my digestive. And even in this year alone, I've had periods where I focused completely on the fermented foods for a while and was able to lose weight, was able to build my health up, was able to stay healthy when everybody around me was getting sick. So it does work, and I can vouch too, I tend to hold some pretty good psychic energy. But when you look at these connections, and if your digestive is not on track, and that's going to affect your nervous system, and your nervous system really affects your physical energy level, it affects everything from hair to nails to processing to detoxifying the body. Okay, and if your body's not getting detoxified, it's like putting a plug in the dam. The water's not going to go anywhere, but it sure is going to build up. So we need to be able to detoxify. It needs to be able to filter out. And as we learned about last year, around this time, almost a year ago, when we had Laota of the Sun, Laota Russell, on, and what was really interesting, and she talked about this, that of course things like our hair, because she's a hair healer, affects our ability to communicate with the divine. So here again, we're coming back to that chakra energy. We're coming back to that spiritual energy. So, when you look at these different pieces, and she had mentioned as well that the hair and the ability for the hair to grow and to be strong comes back to the nervous system. And then again, the nervous system is connected to the digestive system, right? Starting to sound like that old song, This bone's connected to that bone type of thing. So that's a couple of things. Jeremiah also mentions on his website copper for parasites and bitters. Particularly, he loves rapini for green bitters. Highly, highly nutritious, also known as broccoli rabi in there. So these are things that when you learn how to blend these foods up, and he's got some great recipes, by the way, on his website if you want to go check it out. Again, that's imraw.me. And he's got some juice recipes on there, and he's got some kelp noodle recipes and different things on there that you may just want to go in and check that out a little bit. Now, another thing that Jeremiah said is he said, well, this is really great. I can detoxify my body. I'm starting to feel some strength back. But what about the rest of me? And this is huge when we talk about trauma and we talk about veterans and people that have been through rough experiences, whatever it is. You've heard me talk on shows, trauma that I've been through. You've heard that in interviews that I've done with people that have come out, that I've been through some pretty traumatic situations in my life. And you can't heal just one aspect. It's an opening and it's a start. But that's what Jeremiah was noticing. He's like, well, the body's starting to feel stronger, but what about the rest of me? And as we know, we can't just push the emotions aside. We can't just push them down. We can't pretend they don't exist. And there's the sense of when you've been through a lot of trauma, when you've been through a high level of stress, and it's so interesting for me to sit here and do this show right now. And again, for those that are just tuning in, we did expect to have Jeremiah Shattuck on. I had tried to reach him, and so I think that something must have come up for him that was, he's been very, very busy working on a lot of projects, and I know his White Ormus Cafe has been very busy with catering projects, and I think he had something that probably came up last minute on this, so I apologize that he's not here with us tonight, but I am sharing some of his concepts and elaborating on them from my own background as well in here. But as I was saying, it's interesting for me to do this show right now because I'm sitting here making this transition, and I love that Jeremiah focuses on transition because that's what it really is. And a transition oftentimes mentally, linguistically, when we think about it from a neuro-linguistic programming aspect, that transition is easier for the brain, the body, the soul to accept than even change. For me, I'm going through a huge change right now. I am stepping out of an amazing house that I've been living in for the last 7 years in southern Utah, surrounded by the beautiful area of Zion National Forest, and I've had the blessing of being close to family for the last 7 years, and my life is now taking me to be on the road and to tour. And a lot of people think, oh, that's really exciting and how wonderful for you. But I'm not going to be staying in 5-star luxury hotels. I am going to be touring through a mini cargo van around the U.S. and hopefully going into Canada next year. So it's a huge adventure, and I'm not only doing that with me, but I'm doing that with my cat, Orly, who I just rescued a couple of months ago, about 2.5 months ago. And it's a huge shock. Even when we go through things that are pleasant, it's a huge shock. And to think of this as a transition instead of change or trauma or stress is a big relief. It's a big ease. So this transitioning, and when we talk about transitioning the warrior, again, there's many more pieces to it. It's not to discount the other types of trauma out there, but the warrior energy, the being in war zones, is a unique, in and of its own, level of trauma or space of trauma with things. And it was wonderful when I put this post up here this week that I not only got some incredible compliments from some war vets that came in, but also I had the ability to talk with some former war vets who were doing energetic healing. So as we know, we've kind of started to move in this direction. But before I jump to the energetic healing, I want to bring in another piece that Jeremiah is involved with, which is LA Free School, and that's SKOOL on there. And there's a link to that from his website. And what they do is they offer free education to war veterans, and that education is in things like health and nutrition and alternate therapies, conscious living. They bring in things like yoga and Qigong classes that people can go and take. And this is an amazing experience. You know, these people, they don't want to be outcast. They don't want to be thrown as some victim of society. And most of them don't even worry about the praise. They just want people to care. They don't care about them as another person on the face of this earth, and to recognize what they've been through. We all like to have our traumas recognized. We don't have to dwell on them. We don't have to be a victim to them. But we all like people to acknowledge that, yeah, indeed, we've been through this little piece of drama and trauma. Drama and trauma, both, they kind of go hand in hand. And so there's a lot of different aspects as we start to delve into that. And this was another part, because when Jeremiah came through, he said, you know, my one hope is to detoxify all this stuff. My one hope is to detoxify the system. And what he learned is, again, that energy detox connection that's in there. And not only through food, but through the physical body. So he found that through yoga and Qigong in particular, that those allowed the body to detox in a very unique way, because that type of movement, that specific type of practice, not only detoxes on a physical level, because the way it literally gets in there and it massages all of the organs of our body and creates this restoration, but it directly affects the chi. And again, we've got that digestive colon aspect, we've got the digestive intestinal tract aspect that goes through and connects the chi. So if we can raise our chi through something, say like yoga or Qigong, a moving meditation, okay, Tai Chi is another aspect that works really well with this. That's chi building, okay? So these chi building physical movements is another piece of the puzzle. When we have that kind of physical movement in our life, our digestive heals. See, they all go hand in hand. And when we look at a practice like yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, these different practices, it also brings in the serenity, the peace, the spiritual practice of it, because it's not based just on a physical exercise. It's based on honoring the elements. It's based on honoring the body. It's based on balance. And this is a very, very powerful thing. When we come out of trauma situations, we need to be able to balance. It's very important that we detoxify the mind and the emotions and the spirit as well. And as we know, these physical practices are also spiritual practices. And that's a powerful thing, because oftentimes our bodies are imbalanced, our psyches are imbalanced. When we've been through a trauma situation, particularly a war situation, then these things are not in balance. And most of the time, again, when people are coming out of these situations, they're being pumped full of drugs. They're not being given balance. They're not being offered these opportunities. So I encourage those, if you're around the LA area, check out LA Free School. And again, that's SKOOL. And they teach things like the alchemy. They teach metaphysical studies. They teach these different practices, and they offer these classes, and they're absolutely free to veterans. So it's worth checking these things out. So we have, that's another part of our physical piece, which then transitions us into these other aspects. Again, the emotional, the mental aspects, because what we do know is, especially when these things are done outside, we are healing the emotions. We're healing the mental aspects in there. Every movement is like speaking a prayer. Every movement in these practices is a direct connection with spirit. And every time we make that connection, and they help us to be present, and we've heard that from several people I've had on my show. Last year I had several people. I had Peter Finner on, talking about mindfulness, things like this. And those are all things you can go back and check those direct components in the archives. But these are things that really help. And you might wonder, Jesse, why are you bringing some of these pieces in? Why are you even dealing with a show on war veterans? And, that doesn't seem like a very compassionate area. Like what is that about? War is not a compassion aspect. But what's interesting is how many times war does bring compassion out in society. But what we're really looking at is, how do we have compassion with these people? Because, again, even so many people that intend to be compassionate tend to over-baby, over-pamper these people. They're not looking for people to do everything for them. They're just looking for somebody to be patient enough to listen to them, to be a friend, to accept them for who they are, and to remind them, and these are all pieces of feedback that I've gotten from people in these situations, to remind them that we all have shortcomings. And one of the things that I found during this week in having this discussion open on this topic is I had people coming to me saying these very things. They said, you know what? One of the biggest things, one practitioner came to me and she said, one of the biggest things that I noticed when I work with people with PTS is they're very, very hard on themselves. They take on this perfectionist attitude. And I thought to myself, why do they do that? And I thought for a little while, and I realized, because we put that pressure on them. We let them know that they have to be perfectionists. When you're sitting in the middle of a war zone, you don't have two inches to spare if there's a landmine there. 2 inches is yours and your whole platoon's lives. Yeah, there's a little bit of pressure in that. So it's amazing, and this is a big thing, because whether the trauma is from war, whether it's from something like I went through with rape situations, whether it's something that we deal with from abuse situations, and most people have gone through levels of abuse of one kind or another, is the person that's in that position, when we place them in a victim position, they feel that they have to be perfect. And they step more and more into the victim position because of trying to be perfect. But you know what? None of us are perfect. And at the same time, we're totally perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, if you want to say that. We're perfect as we are, whatever that is. And, we're never going to be perfect at everything as long as we're existing in a human body. We can come close in some situations, but there's no need to put that pressure on ourselves. We all have our shortcomings, and that was one of the things that brought out, and I thought, that is a powerful thing. And we have more and more young kids coming back from war. They went out young, they're coming back young. And we need to remind them they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to live in this critical, judgmental world, because that's what they're taught a lot of times in war zones, to judge, to criticize, to make assumptions. Kill that person because they're from a different country. That's what they're taught. They're not taught to say, you know what, that's somebody's father. That's somebody's child. They're programmed with these amazing things. And this is no different than kids who are raised this way. The only difference is that it's coming as adults from, just like kids trust their parents, adults go off to war and they trust the government that sent them off to war, even if it's their choice. It's something really powerful to think about, this programming, this mind control. And that's another piece that Jeremiah, when we talk about him looking at this detoxing package, so to say, where we need to detox all sides. So taking the yoga every day or the Qigong or whatever it is, and staying with the live, raw food diet, pure diets, pure waters, things like this. You'll find that when you do these things and you're building your chi, you also will not be as programmable. You won't be living for everybody else's opinion. And there's no glory in that, and there's no value in that. Only the ego within us wants to live for everybody else's opinion, because our soul self doesn't do that. Our soul self doesn't sit around going, oh, please approve me. Please let me be worthy in your eyes. It doesn't do that at all. It knows how worthy it is. Only the ego seeks that out. It's a huge thing to think about. And that's what they're taught. So when they come back and they start to reintegrate in society, again, we've got these multiple levels that we're talking about, the whole mental thing has to be reprogrammed. It's kind of like saying, okay, everything you've learned, we just need to wipe that right out in a lot of ways and start you from scratch. Because it's so disorientating what they've learned. We don't stop to think about, we're training people to be murderers and killers. That's what we're doing when we send them to war. Oh, we tell them, oh, you're going to go do a good deed and fight for your country. But in reality, what we're training them to do is to be murderers and killers. Now, you may not like hearing that, but that's the way it is. So there's some big, big pieces here. Now, what was really interesting, one of the people that responded to my posting earlier this week on this, and he's an energy healer and a war veteran, And he was talking about the interesting connection that really gets left out. And this is where we start to tap into more of the mental, emotional, and the spiritual connection in all of this. And he was bringing up the aspects, and this is something I work with and I'm going to be working with during my tour. It's one of the events that I have set up. It's not just for vets, but it's for all kinds of healing. He says we don't heal the energetic grid. Now, we heard Damien Wynn earlier this year talk about energetic grids and his work in that. Another great show you could go back and catch in our archives. But this is a really powerful thing, and this is something that's highly, highly overlooked, because even if we get people on track with the exercise and we start to bring them back in and we start working with them, when we go, okay, we got the compassion part down and we're being supportive and we're listening and we're having patience and we've got them on track, that, okay, you just take the small steps and we're all connected, here, and just we all have our challenges and our weak points as well, no matter who we are. So you get all of those pieces down. But the energetic grids, this is powerful. And I love the way that this person described it, because they described there being these three different keys in this, but basically no matter which key you're coming from, he described it's like having a little time capsule inside of you, and a little capsule of negative garbage. And sometimes that capsule has a slow seep to it that seeps throughout, and sometimes it explodes right away, and it's a high trauma level, which is what happens a lot of times when people are like in the middle of a bunch of bombing and air raids and things like that. And then he says, and then there's the other one that opens a little bit, or it doesn't open to start with, and then years later it explodes and opens up. And this is where a lot of times we go, whoa, where did that come from? Like, you're with somebody and it's like all of a sudden they're like a whole different person in your life, right? And that's like one of those little capsules that just, go off unexpectedly. And that's one of those ones that didn't go off when it was first happening. And that's the type of thing that we'll see a lot of times, for example, in abuse situations or rape situations or things like that. Somebody might numb it at the moment, but then it pops open later. And he was talking about this in relation to the energetic grid, and I really agree with a lot of this aspect of things, because if we don't heal the energetic grid, all the other work can get useless. If we don't heal the soul and the spirit part, the rest of it can get totally useless. Or it can take a lot of effort to maintain. One of those two in there. And it's a big factor, because when we talk about the energetic grid, we're now not just talking about ourselves. And the energetic grid, of course, dictates everything on every level for us as an individual. It taps into, multiple lives, parallel lives. It taps into all these different regions. It sets up our programming mentally, emotionally, physically from these little grid releases. And then not only do we have our own personal grid, but we've got the bigger global grids out there, or universal grids out there. So when we send a bunch of these people off to war and we put them in this, and then these little time capsules go off and they spread out through the energetic grid, right? We've seen little pictures of that where you have that little matrix and the things just travel through all over the place on them. And so when it does that, and that then goes out through the individual, for every individual that's doing that, that's going to impact the global and the universal grids. So this is where we start to shift it. What better way to keep people away from divine presence and love and light and ascension than, hey, start a few wars. out there, right? Because now we got everybody in this negative programming, which then affects the bigger, larger universal grids. And, these are the pieces we don't think about. We think, somebody went off to war. How nice. Oh, they got PTSD. That's kind of a bummer, but, I guess they'll live with it. At least they're alive, right? We don't think about what it's doing to each and every one of us. It's not just about those people that went to war, because every one of those people affect the universal grid, which then comes back and affects each and every individual. This comes back to our concepts that we hold out there of being interrelated, interconnected. We are one. We might be sitting around in a whole bunch of different bodies, but we are one. Something to think about. So it's very important for us to put a focus on war veterans. It's very important for us to put a focus on trauma people, not to keep them as victims, but to build them up and bring them into strong, healthy mind, body, spirits. Get them detoxified, because what we really need to do is detoxify on this multiple level way. And this isn't, bam, one session, everybody's all okay sort of thing necessarily, but this is about treating somebody as their whole self and not the individual components. Because if you treat one piece, but you don't treat the other 3 or 4 pieces, well, those other 3 or 4 pieces are going to override the piece that you treated. It's just a given. It's law of cause and effect in there. Okay? Now, granted, by healing one, you might start to affect the others, but you're going to spend a lot of energy. But if you treat the person as a whole individual, so you get them on the detoxification diets and the foods and what they need to get the free radicals out of their system and all of those things, right? And you get them on the pure water and those sorts of things. And you get them into the Qigong or the yoga classes or Tai Chi classes and things like that. Okay, now you've got a couple of the pieces there. But then when you supplement that, and every day they're working with the meditational aspects or the spiritual aspects or the other pieces in there, the conscious building pieces, now you're treating the whole person. Now you're able to take care of those little energy time capsules and implants. That's how the implants get in. You hear people talk about energetic implants. That's another way that they get in, is by creating trauma. Okay? This is part of why I don't sit around listening to the news. Because, when we're exposed, the news is trauma as well in our life. And yes, we should be aware of what's happening. I'm not saying don't be aware, because you should be aware. You want to build your consciousness. But all of these traumas, the more traumas that can be fed into us, the more programmable we become. Okay? The more programmable we become, the more everything gets weighted down. Us, the universe, the whole works. You see, it just keeps filtering around. So that's why we want to treat the whole self. Because if you don't treat the whole self, and yes, it oftentimes with trauma aspects, you're talking multiple sessions for treatment. You're talking, several weeks or months, depending on the situation and the case in there. Okay? And this is why detoxification on all levels, multiple levels. And I'll tell you, we can all use it. Doesn't matter how long we've been doing things. Okay? But it's important to look at every piece of it. And this is part of why, again, those that are just tuning in, we were supposed to have Jeremiah Shattuck on the show, and I've been sharing pieces of his work as well as putting my own input and additional understandings to the different pieces he works with. I have a feeling he got very tied up with some of the projects that he's working on. his White Ormus Cafe. He's based, by the way, in the Los Angeles, Santa Monica region. So for those of you that are out there, look up White Ormus Cafe. It's a live food cafe, raw food cafe, all powerful, nutritious, delicious food, so to say, out there. And Jeremiah is very focused on the consciousness building, again, not just from food or exercise or those kinds of components, but making us conscious as people. So, again, in treating this whole factor, we want to do it because if we don't and we leave these other pieces, they're going to start turning the other pieces around. We leave them there with room to grow. We were talking here about the energetic grids, and we were talking about implants, and we hear this a lot with people. You hear this a lot from people involved in starseed groups and things like that, and they talk about, those implants, you got to watch out for those out there. And the implants are a powerful thing, but that's how they get in. They get in through these programming methods. The implants come to us. It's not always like, hey, somebody, sure, you've got the stuff that can be implanted under the skin, like a microchip or something like that. But, really when the energy implants are the ones that really tend to get us. And they come in because of these trauma situations. So, again, that can come on multiple levels. Now, the energy implants that come from something like a war zone, say, versus household abuse or rape. People have heard me talk about my situation with that in past shows, or different aspects, whatever the trauma is for us, change, shift, whatever it is. For everybody, it's different, and one person might think, that's just minor trauma, but for that person, it's major trauma. So I'm not minimizing the other ones, but we were kind of focusing tonight more on the war trauma aspect because it hits at this deeper aspect, again, because you're combining it not just with the trauma of being in a war zone, but the aspects of abuse, of betrayal. You have a lot of abuse when you're, in these types of agencies. At one point in my life, I worked for the Postal Service, so I know what government agencies can do and how abusive they can be. Matter of fact, I spent 2 years in litigations against the Postal Service at one point. There you go. There's a piece of my rebel side of things in there, and that's a whole long story for another show. But, the trauma comes in these multiple levels, that you're being betrayed by your own people, which is, again, very similar to a child who's betrayed by a parent. And so you've got betrayal, you've got loud shell shock, you're in a situation that you're basically very vulnerable and very powerful. You're being dictated and told what to do, and it's just one trauma thing after another happening. So the number and the magnitude of the implants that go into war victims, or I shouldn't say victims because that's not the right word, but warriors, people of war, veterans, in there is humongously over what most of us can imagine, especially those of us, say, in North America or someplace where, you're not dealing with bombs going off outside of your house every single day, multiple times a day, which is what they're experiencing. You go to sleep and you don't know if you're waking up because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you walk across the ground, if you're going to survive that. These are the things, and they get in our head. They get in our head, and what does that do? You're in this environment that you're constantly in this vulnerable position, and every programming that's coming in that environment is victim, 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 victim. So we can't exactly just expect them to come back to society and go, okay, I'm out of the war zone, I'm okay now. They need time to transition, just like any of us. If you go in for surgery, you need time to transition back to health. It's the same basic concept in there, which is why Jeremiah went to transition the warrior versus some other term, because that's what he found it to be, was it's a transition, and transitions are not quick overnight fixes that you put a patch on it and you never get to the root of the problem. Transitions are you deal with the whole thing, and you deal with it in little pieces, and you deal with it over time. And it's progression. And so, again, one of the best things we can do if you have war veterans in your life is patience and support to keep them on track for their transition. And again, the government, it's kind of like, well, thanks so much for being at war. Here's a couple of pills, and we expect you to be all fine and don't bother us anymore. They don't help them get the real treatment they need. So that's why we have more groups surfacing like Jeremiah's. Now, you heard me mention about the energetic grids as well. And this is something that's near and dear to me, because this is where we can majorly clear the trauma. And this is where the spiritual piece of it, the metaphysical piece, I could go into a whole show on why people incarnate as a soul and go to war, and why wars perpetuate. We have a whole soul process. Our message earlier, before we started discussion tonight, was based around soulmates. Well, we perpetuate these cycles until we decide to step out of the lesson of war. And war is going to continue, because you're going to have this balance that's constantly trying to be sought. And you have those people that think it's really fun to play and put people in war for their own little pleasure and money games. Okay? But it's not fun, because we're talking people's lives. We're talking our whole. We're talking our universe. We're talking our earth. And there's so much more to it than just that. And you know what? We're not pawns in a chess game. We're people. We're spirits. We're souls. We're so much more than that. So in looking at these pieces, a lot of times the war aspect is soulmates. It's a group of soulmates that are incarnating together, trying to figure out their balance. But we have the chance to evolve. We have the chance, and it starts by treating the whole self. As people come back, we treat the whole self. Now, I talk about the energetic grids because this is so incredible. It's such a huge impact, because when we can treat the energetic grids, when we can remove the implants of the negative implants and that programming, and that's what the energetic grids do, is when we work on the energetic grids, we remove the implants that are undesirable, that keep us held locked in these patterns, keep us held locked into the programming of mind thought patterns and emotional patterns. And we've trained these people. You come back from war, you're supposed to be a victim. And if you're not a victim, you won't get the benefits that we told you we'd give you. The heck with that. So by clearing the grid system, it's a huge asset, and it really helps to clear all the others, because when we clear out that negative programming, when we clear the grid system and we clean it up and we remove those implants, we stop being influenced. When we stop being influenced, we choose the healthier lifestyles, and it becomes much easier to do the detoxing on the other areas as well, because we've changed our thought pattern from, say, that victim space to an empowered space. We've changed it from I can't do anything to I can do. And again, what happens, I mentioned this earlier, it's that perfectionist attitude, I have to be perfect. That's what a lot of these war veterans come back with. No, you just got to be you. I'm not concerned with how perfect somebody does something. I'm not concerned with how perfect their house is. I'm concerned with who they are. And that's where compassion comes in. And reminding these people, and that's a big part of it, is, hey, we all struggle at times. And today we take one step. And maybe tomorrow we don't get a step taken, or maybe we get an inch taken. We don't get a whole step, but that's still an inch, and that's okay. And you might not be good at one thing, but I bet you're good at something else. And they have to be reminded of their strengths, because a lot of that's been stripped down through the energetic grid. Powerful, powerful, powerful when we talk in this deal. Again, because that grid is like that big web. It's like that big network. It's like a netting. You've seen the netting, and it's a bunch of squares, and it spans out. And again, each one is affected. Each one affects our global aspects. So when we heal our grids personally, we're healing the world. This is something that I've added because in watching the state of the world today, and in watching what people are dealing with in these days and times, those of you that were here at the beginning of the show, you heard me. I'm going on tour. I'm stepping out of an incredible home that I've been living in for the last 7 years, and I will be moving into a mini cargo van and touring the U.S. I will be on tour for the next 4 months all around the U.S., and I'm offering different things, from individual sessions with people while I'm on the road, angelic healings and cleansings and integrated development work, but I'm also offering full-day events, which we go out into nature and we do transitional transformation, balancing, harmony, all kinds of things, whatever is needed for the individuals in nature. And I also have a couple of full weekend events that are based around that way as well. And it's a what I call an effortless learning. It's like you're sitting and you're having conversations with me, and at the end of the day you realize you've learned about 100 things about yourself. I like to make it that way. And I deal with whatever people are dealing with at the time. And then I have a couple of events going on. I have a satsang style event that's going on, but I'm also doing an energetic healing event in several of the places that I'm going to be. I'm going to be doing healing events in Seattle. I'm going to be doing healing events around the East Coast, like around Connecticut, Massachusetts. In that region, I think I've got 3 or 4 set up back around there as well that people can attend, and I'm hoping to add some more to the venues on things. And those events are part of what I'm going to be doing is working with angel energy, but part of it is also going to be affecting these energetic grids. And I felt that this was such a powerful time because the times that we live in and these days, people are experiencing so many changes and so many traumas. We have right now we have in October, coming up in October, the 6th of the Uranus-Pluto squares, which is a huge amount of turbulence in the air. It's a huge amount of unexpected change. It's a huge amount of us having opportunities or to shift the state of the world. And it's where we see a lot of upheaval coming. And this is something a lot of people have been expressing, have so much trauma, so much upheaval for the last 3 years or the last 2 years or the last 10 years, whatever it's been for them. And we have certain signs, obviously, that are being more impacted than others. Scorpio is one of those because Saturn's been in Scorpio. But this healing of the energetic grid, because we've got a lot of people who have been through wars, and we've got a lot of people going through other personal traumas of losing their job, not being able to feed their families, losing their homes, people who are just experiencing the daily trauma, a lot of souls passing from this earth, known and unknown. And we're seeing this even in all different shapes and forms. People are on this constant trauma when they're having to worry about, if I go to the supermarket and I buy this food and it's polluted by Monsanto stuff, or or it's GMO, or it's this or it's that. It's a constant trauma. And so in going in and healing the energetic grids through my events, it gives people the chance to come in and to break through those things and to get rid of some of those implants. And I made it deliberately an event because we need to turn around. We need to transition from pain to pleasure again. We have that opportunity with some of the influences we have at hand, and we need to be able to keep ourselves together in a wholeness, connected with divine spirit in the midst of this trauma, in the midst of people feeling insecure in their own homes, in the midst of the state of the world. And we have to remember that we have the power to change it. We have the power to change our world. And it starts with us as an individual. So that's why it has been so critical for me to bring that in. And it applies so much to our war veterans, and so much, because now I don't think I can walk down the street or go anywhere without finding somebody in trauma. I don't think I can come across a person these days who hasn't been in trauma or is in trauma or is dealing with trauma from some point in their life. As we talked about the little time capsule that's gone off from something that happened 20 years ago or 40 years ago, or whatever the case is. And it doesn't matter whether you are an average person on the street or whether you have been a healer for decades. I'm seeing a lot of healers going through incredible trauma right now. I'm seeing a lot of healers checking out of this world, saying, I'm done. We don't need to be there. We just need to step into our wholeness, which is what we really are. It's about embracing, it's not about, oh my God, I'm deprived from having this food or that food anymore in the process of wholeness. It's about connecting with our real soul self. It's about connecting with the divine energy so that we really can have that pleasure we seek, so that we really can have the joy in our life. And it's accessible to us. And it's not as hard as we make it. And it's not as complicated as we make it. All we have to do is choose it. That's it. And once we choose it, and we take the steps for that choice, we're going to have a whole different world. And it's not going to be filled with this trauma and these shocks and this devastation. And the next time you find somebody sitting around in that victim space saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, give them a little nudge. Give them a little gentle reminder. You know what? Even if you can't do one thing, there's something else you can do. Remind them. We all have our challenges. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter what you've studied or how much you've so-called perfected yourself or refined yourself or how good of a grasp you have on things. Even when somebody makes something look easy, doesn't mean that it's not a challenge. I can say that even in my own life right now. I might be making everything look easy. It might look like a whole lot of fun, but I'll tell you, I'm being challenged daily, minute, every minute. And I've spent my life standing in the spiritual space. Doesn't matter where you are. It's the only difference between me and anybody else out there is I choose to treat it with wholeness. And I choose to surrender to the process, not give in and be weak or be a victim, but to surrender and find the adventure and the joy of the experience. I have to say it's been such a pleasure to introduce you to the work that Jeremiah is doing and to bring this topic here. And perhaps, we will be able to get him on the show at some point in here. But again, if you're in the LA area, connect with him. Check out his websites, transitionthewarrior.com, and also I am, and that's just the letters, I am raw, RAW, .me, and that's where his work with Conscious Life Force and Orma's Cafe is, and you can learn a little bit more about him on there. And, we're sorry he didn't make it on personally tonight, but it's been a pleasure to share his work and to delve into this particular topic tonight because it's a powerful one and it's a needed one in these days and times. And like I said, certainly a pleasure for me to bring this through tonight. And here I am, as those that have listened throughout the show know, I'm in shifts and transitions, and I'm down to my last couple of days where I am. I will no longer be broadcasting this show from where I am, but I will be broadcasting it from different cities all over the country now. And so you'll have to pay attention and see what city I'm broadcasting from. And if you're in that area where I am, come and see me. Check it out on my website, JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com. Look at where I'm going to be because I'm all over the U.S. for the next 3 and 4 months. And amazing lineup of venues. And even if you can't stay for a venue, poke your head in and say, hey, Jessie, I've been listening to you on your show, and I just wanted to come in and say hi. So look it up and see what's happening. There's some great stuff happening, and I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll come in and poke your head in and say hi to me someplace that I am. That would be wonderful. That would be great. I would love to meet you in person. And so it's been an amazing show. If you've missed any part of it, go back, catch the archives. Next week here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, we're doing a musical show with Craig Corollas and looking at his work in music. Really going to be a great, fun show. And Craig is also passionate about war veteran things. He's actually written a couple of songs specifically towards war veterans and their place and their purpose and things. So he's a very interesting person. You're going to want to tune in for that. Again, my books, you can check those out. The work that I do, again, the Compassion Tour, which is starting in literally days, and videos that I put up and products that I have available and archive shows and all of my blog postings, all of those things you can find on my website, JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com. Paid events that you're doing directly with me as opposed to working with one of the store locations that I'm going to be at. Those are listed at JessieAnnNicholsGeorge.eventbrite.com. I also have my coaching services listed there as well. And, in addition, there's just all kinds of things that I offer, so you got to go in and check it out. September special deal right now, if you register for any of my full 1 or 2 day weekend events, you will receive all 4 of my books in the ebook version absolutely free, so that's a great little bonus. We're talking about somewhere in the realm of a $40 bonus in there. Approximately. with that, so it's worth checking it out. And if you already have a copy of my books, well, we can send those free ebooks to somebody of your choice if you attend. And like I said, those weekend events are amazing, transformational. I've had people that have been waiting for things to happen in their lives for 2 or 3 years, showed up to one weekend event, and everything has transitioned in their life. So for the better, I must say, those things that they were waiting for to come through for all that time finally came through within 2 months after being at the event. So these are highly transformational, highly bringing you back into harmony, really, really worth checking out. Don't forget that we've got several shows right here on Main Street Universe as well throughout the week. Sunday nights we have Darren Bouquet, who's the reader at Madame Laveau in New Orleans, and he does spiritual insights. Monday nights is Randy Goldberg doing Vedic astrology. Tuesdays, Susan Weed, absolutely love her show, short, sweet, but packed full of information, and she shares her work in herbs and natural plants. Wednesday nights we have our flagship show with Daniel and Janice, and they do different things from discussions to observing the Sabbath and the turning of the year and readings and just a guest on the show periodically. They've had Andres Spitamus. They've had some good names actually on the show. And Thursdays we oftentimes have Queen Mother Amaku on. She does Wise Woman Renegade. She has a background in Egyptian culture. Fridays, also Kevin Baird, Walking on the Sidewalk with his Horizon Oracles Journeys deck, a deck that he created, and you can find out more about that at templeofgaia.com. And then, of course, Friday nights, late night, Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and that's with me. And this is Jessie Ann Nichols, George. I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you to all of our listeners, not only those that are on Blog Talk Radio, but those that are streaming live through PEN, known as Pair Encounters Network, StreamFinder, TalkStream Live, as well as those that are catching our podcast at iTunes and TuneIn.com, and also those catching the YouTube version of our show. And you know what? I look forward to seeing you back here next week as we delve more into activating compassion. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show this evening, share it with others. It's going to be available at the same link in our archives. And I'm going to leave you tonight with the song Yearning For, also known as Over and Over. It's by Shemshai. Check out their work, www.shemshai.com. That's SHIMSHAI.com. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week, right here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. May you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have an absolutely amazing week.
And if I could see what makes me blind, I would soar to the edge of my mind, and to touch what seems unreal, just to show you the way that I feel. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune, caught in a balance of sun and moon. Oh, deep inside, the light within, shining to show you it's here to begin. When all I have is all I need, I will soar to the edge of eternity, and we see it eye to eye, one within love to be for the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in the balance of God and your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower, whispering secrets, I bet you can't keep it, no turning back now, this time we reveal it, one to another, all will discover the essence within the most beautiful lover. Time is still turning, the love is still Deep in your spirit, your heart still yearning for. Yearning for. When all we have is all we need, all that we ask for shall be received. And we see in eye to eye, one within love to be for the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in the balance of God and man. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune of life in the circle and love in bloom. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower, whispering secrets, I bet you can't keep it. No turning back now, this time we reveal it. One to another, all will discover the essence within the most beautiful lover. Time is still turning, the love is still burning. Deep in your spirit, your heart is still yearning for. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower, whispering secrets, I bet you can't keep it. No turning back now, this time we repeat it. One to another, all will discover the essence within the most beautiful lover.